Namaskar and welcome to this special presentation on D-Day India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Aviation sector and particularly civil aviation is seen as an engine of global growth. It connects nations, people and economies. In this domain, Asia-Pacific region holds great importance. It is home to some of the fastest growing aviation markets in the world. An estimate says by 2035, the region is expected to account for over 40% of global air traffic, with nearly 3.5 billion passengers traveling annually. But the prospects of growth comes concerns regarding climate change and sustainable development. Now, India is hosting the second Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Civil Aviation in New Delhi on 11th and 12th of September. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll talk about the key opportunities and challenges facing the sector, transforming aviation sector, India and the Asia-Pacific. Joining me to take the conversation forward is a special guest, Wamlongmang Walnam, Secretary, Ministry of Civil Aviation, India. Good evening and welcome to the program, sir. Now, we understand that India is hosting the second edition of the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Civil Aviation. If you could give us a sense of what are we seeking to achieve through this conference as the global players come on the same platform?
Yeah, good evening. First of all, this Asia-Pacific group of countries really represents in aviation the fastest growing segment. And the countries who are getting represented in this conference are really countries who are driving the growth of aviation sector globally. And therefore, the meeting of policy makers from these countries is really something which is a significant event where important decisions will be taken.
Right. So tell us more about the region in focus. We're talking about the Asia-Pacific region. 60% of the global population resides in this region. The importance that it occupies in the global aviation map, how do you see it?
Yeah. So it is the fastest growing region for aviation globally. And within that, it represents countries who are really at the forefront of some of the aviation initiatives, whether it is by the growth rate or by the new innovations that are being brought in, efficient airports and new airlines that are coming up. And therefore, along with ICAO, we will be discussing some of these current and very pressing issues of aviation in this ministerial conference, which starts tomorrow.
We're talking about the second Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Civil Aviation. Sir, we're also talking about India, which occupies an important position in the region. It is the third largest domestic market in aviation globally. What kind of driving force does the country represent in the region and in this conference?
Yeah. So if we come to India, then it's a country where the aviation sector has been growing very steady. Even if you go back about 20 years, our annual growth rate is in the range of 10%. And using that foundation, in fact, the great initiative has been over the last 10 years, the government has taken steps to build on that foundation. The doubling of the number of airports over the last 10 years is something which does not happen easily, but the government was committed. The government has focused, and we have enabled that continued growth by developing the airports, doubling it. And the way the framework has been created, the ecosystem has been created for aviation. Today, we have our airlines companies in India who have placed large number of orders. And besides the future where they have placed large number of orders, since the last 10 years, the number of aircraft have already doubled. So already the aircraft itself has doubled, and over 1,000 orders are in the pipeline. So therefore, on the aircraft side, what the government has done, the private sector has complemented, and we are on a very steady and solid growth path in aviation in India. And along with us, the Asia-Pacific countries are also moving forward.
And so, as you mentioned that India is on the growth path, there are a host of, beyond the conventional aviation sector roles, there are a host of ancillary functions as well associated with civil aviation. There is maintenance, there is repair, cargo operation, and so on. What kind of leadership role could India play as far as these areas are concerned in the region as a whole?
Yes. So one of the very critical ancillary or related activity is the MRO, that is the maintenance of the aircraft. And the government has realized the importance, because currently this MRO activity or the MRO work that is there for our Indian aircrafts itself has reached a value of $2 billion. But in the current scenario, the Indian MROs are not able to take up this entire business. Only about 20% gets done in India. So the government has corrected the inverted duty structure. The GST Council has corrected it. The budget has made announcements providing for a favorable environment. And therefore, our expectation is that now the MRO industry will grow both in its overall size to about $4 billion, and also a larger percentage of this MRO business or the industry of India will be taken up by Indian MROs. So in that way, we are really looking at expanding not just the airlines and the aircraft, but the ancillary industries.
Right. And so a true success of any aviation sector is also measured in terms of how accessible are the services to the masses, to the people in general in the country. In that regard, we look at the UDAN scheme, the manner in which it seeks to promote regional connectivity, promote affordable travel for people. How has that been a landmark for Indian aviation sector?
Yeah, so the UDAN has been something very innovative, something which the government started in 2016, and the first flight happened in 2017. And as of today, it has enabled 86 airports which were unserved, meaning having no flights, or underserved, meaning having less than 7 flights a week, are now having flights. So 86 airports, airstrips have got activated, and over 575 routes have been created, and these are connecting Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities which earlier had no air connectivity. So it has provided or made available air connectivity to the length and breadth of our country. The common man is able to travel, the student who has to go for exams, the entrepreneur who has to go for business, they are now able to fly, reach their destinations quickly, and make progress. So the UDAN has been transformative, and thereby, in fact, building up the aviation segment in India by providing connectivity to the metro cities and all parts of the country.
And the way in which new greenfield airports are being added to India's aviation ecosystem, the growth momentum is going to go forward from here.
Yes, very much. And to that, we have to give credit to the government, because the National Civil Aviation Policy of 2016 provides the framework, and added to that is the Greenfield Policy. So there's a very stable framework for promoters, investors, state governments to take up greenfield projects. The predictable procedures that are in place enable, whether it's a private investor, whether it's a state government, or anyone interested in setting up greenfield airports, the procedures, the mechanism is well laid out, and we have had successful greenfield projects, and even now some which are in final stages of preparation. Again, something which the efforts of the government have brought about visible and major results.
Right. Mr. Bollam, I'd now like to return to the theme of the second Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Civil Aviation. The focus is on growth and sustainability. How does this theme underline the key opportunities and challenges facing this sector, not just in India, but the region as a whole?
Yeah. Since I've spoken on growth, let me speak on sustainability. Yes. And that, again, is something both the international community and in Asia Pacific and India have been focusing on. And for instance, the sustainable aviation fuel, that is a fuel which reduces the carbon emission, is something which the aviation sector has now identified and adopted, and India also has mandated. Our Ministry of Petroleum has mandated that from 2027, 1% of our aviation fuel will be blended with the SAF, goes to 2%, then 5%, and in the years beyond that, we will make it higher. We have coordinated with the airlines and the aircraft. They are now technologically able to receive the SAF for their aircraft. We are having discussions with the airports so that the fuel infrastructure is set up, and also with the OMCs, the oil companies, so that they invest and start producing the SAF within the country itself. So on sustainability, in the conference, with this kind of experience that we have, the kind of feedstocks that we have, we will be actively participating in the discussions, and we are confident that the Asia-Pacific region will be a leading example of successful adoption of sustainable aviation.
So I want to stay with the theme of aviation, sustainable aviation fuel. A recent World Economic Forum article talks about cleaner fuel options such as the one that you mentioned, but just 0.1% of the flights world over are using this kind of fuel as of now. What explains this slow adaptation to the cleaner fuels?
Yes, so realizing that the technology is new, realizing that the production is still very low, so it's a calibrated approach. So it's something which will get scaled up. So just as I mentioned, the way India has mandated with 1% and slowly going up. So it's the initial stages, and the ecosystem is being developed, and the awareness that a sudden imposition could be harmful for the connectivity available to passengers or the financial viability for the airline. So it reflects a calibrated approach that has been adopted in the sustainable agenda.
Right. And sir, we should also inform our audiences that we're talking about sustainability in the context of aviation, because the sector is often seen as a significant contributor to climate change, to air pollution. What, according to you, are the multifaceted approach, besides the cleaner fuel that you mentioned, that would be required to really turn the sector green? And to what extent these options be discussed in the conference in the next couple of days?
Yeah. So besides the sustainable aviation fuel, which we just discussed, the jet engines themselves are becoming more and more efficient. You know, they are now highly efficient engines that have been developed and that are being utilized. So that itself improves the fuel consumption. Then the other part is the airports. You know, the airports are huge setups in major cities. And for instance, in India, what we have done is we have asked the airports to become users of renewable energy. And I'm happy to inform that 73 of our airports are now using renewable energy completely. So both in the air when the aircraft are flying, and our airports are becoming environment friendly.
Right. And is this also serving as the number of airports you said are using 100% green energy in the country? So is that also a model that the region as a whole is looking at as far as transitioning to cleaner systems, cleaner ecosystems of aviation is concerned?
Yes, that will be very much part of the agenda.
Right. Mr. Bolnam, also achieving net zero in aviation, I understand, has to be a collective effort. It's not just one airport or one nation that can singularly achieve this goal. All nations, stakeholders, industry has to come forward and play a role. So this platform, again, seems very, very interesting, where all leaders could engage together and address these crucial issues.
Yes, very much. And that because it is a forum of ministers and policy makers, you know, so the decisions which are taken, the agreements which are taken, or even the sensitivity that is imbibed through the discussions would have an effect when they make their respective policies. It will be, it's a process which is aspirational, which is indicative, but definitely being a forum of ministers and policy makers, we are confident that the beneficial outcome effects will continue in the months and years that follow the conference.
And so beyond the theme, are there certain priorities with which India is approaching this conference, hosting this conference, the second edition, besides the growth and sustainability theme that we talked about?
You know, the other is sort of really making people understand more closely the success story of Indian aviation. So the formal meetings are one, but the side meetings, the bilateral meetings, the interactions with industry representatives. So really it's a chance to showcase how successful India has been over the last 10 years in promoting aviation, that it's on a stable and sustainable foundation, and that the way forward is really more and more growth. So it's a chance to showcase Indian aviation.
And sir, while highlighting the India success story, there are also a number of agreements in the domain of civil aviation that India has entered into with friendly countries. Could you tell us about the significance of them in really boosting the ecosystem of aviation in the region as a whole?
Agreements, in aviation, one of the main agreements are the bilateral air service agreements that we have with other countries, because aircraft means that it flies from one country to the other. And in that, we have been ensuring that the connectivity available for our citizens, for our passengers, and also the growth of our Indian carriers. These are balanced while we negotiate with the foreign countries, the neighboring countries, the other countries on the bilateral air service agreements, so that we do not make the mistake of opening up our skies and getting flooded by some other foreign entities. So it's a balanced approach, improving the connectivity while promoting our Indian carriers. That has been the principle we have adopted in signing these agreements with different countries.
Right. Taking the conversation forward, Mr. Wallam, aviation, I understand, is a sector that they say never sleeps. It operates 24/7. What are the infrastructure, market, and gigantic workforce-related requirements and challenges that the sector faces and that are likely to come up in the conversations in the conference?
One of the major issues would be the requirement of pilots, because as the number of aircraft increases, in fact, one commercial aircraft requires to the tune of 15 or 20 pilots to service that one aircraft day in and day out, because there's a rotation policy, there's a rest period and other things. So every increase in aircraft really multiplies the number of pilots required. So what are the pilot certification procedures? What are the pilot training arrangements, both for us and for the other countries, and how the regulators like the DGCA operate, at the same time while keeping the aviation safety a very primary focus. So skill development, especially pilot training, would always be an important part in promoting civil aviation.
And so along with that, a host of support staff that also operates. So both in terms of job creation and having the right skill with the right person, there's a great potential in the sector in the days ahead.
Yes, very much. In fact, a study done by ICAO some years back had calculated that the employment multiplier is to the level of 6.1. So every investment or every growth in the aviation sector really creates that kind of multiplier in employment. And we have seen in the big airports in the surrounding areas, the ancillary services really, even anecdotally, it is proven the way it generates employment. And it is something really we are aware of as we continue to promote the aviation sector, both in India and the entire region as a whole.
Right. Mr. Wallam, you mentioned the priority of making aviation sector airlines more secure. Now, if you could expand the definition of what it takes to make the sector aviation domain secure. There is, of course, physical threat. There are cyber threats as well, much of the operations being online. How do you map the challenges and what has been done in this domain of security, making flying secured for people?
Yeah. So in aviation, in fact, the aviation security and aviation safety, which are two very related but different terms.
Yes.
So both are always in our focus. So for instance, today we had pre-conference seminars, and one of the topics, one of the focus area happened to be cybersecurity, because that is something which is now beginning to affect aviation, both by the various IT systems that are used, by the malicious intentions that come through the cyber world. So protecting the cyber infrastructure, ensuring that access to our systems are not allowed is a very major point now. And really, our experts and technical persons had a full session on cybersecurity in aviation today.
And sir, do the present-day regional conflicts that are expanding the manner in which they impact the aviation sector, the route and the frequency of the planes, terror threats. Do these have a cumulative impact on the manner in which the safety infrastructure needs to be boosted?
Yes, and we are alert to that. Our agencies are alert to that. For example, we have in our neighborhood areas where warlike situations exist, and we are always alert to that. We are therefore also the importance of regional cooperation, regional coordination in aviation, so that the agencies and the regulators keep informed of new developments, anything new incidents which happen. So it's a coordinated approach, and our agencies, the security agencies, security regulator are fully aware. We are coordinating, in fact, on a real-time basis.
Right. And sir, just as traffic on the road, we understand that the air traffic is also growing rapidly every year. Demand for air transport, it said, will increase by 4.3% per annum in the next couple of decades. How then does the airspace optimization to efficiently operate multiple airlines in the same space gain significance?
Yes, so airspace management is, again, you have rightly pointed out, one of the focus areas of this conference, and also generally in promoting the growth of aviation, because the airspace is limited. For instance, in India, we have worked with the defense agencies so that we now have a flexible use of airspace that itself has made available a large number of airspace within our jurisdiction, but also beyond our jurisdiction, how to manage the airspace better, how to see that it is most efficiently used, the horizontal separation, the norms that are adopted, the routes that are adopted is again something which is a very central part of the discussions which will take place in this current Asia-Pacific conference, and innovation has remained a very important focus area.
Right. And sir, the concluding question, I want to make something that will be of great interest to our viewers. Dynamic pricing is often not very customer friendly. The prices peak in the manner which makes air travel unaffordable in many cases. And conferences like this, when all the key players, industry leaders, policymakers are together, can some headway, some understanding be achieved in this domain?
You are right. Pricing is an important element, and how to make airfares affordable, first of all, within our country is something which the Ministry of Civil Aviation is very much cognizant. And the RCS scheme, which first of all touches the hinterland, the remote areas, has a clear-cut policy of reserving 50% of the seats at a capped price, so that the new passengers, the passengers with lower income are able to afford. And as far as the commercial routes are concerned, it is something which we monitor. It is something which we ensure that there is a tracking. It is a bit of a dynamic situation. I would not say that we are completely in control of that. It is an unregulated market, but it is something we are fully cognizant. And in forums like this, there is a sensitization, there is a discussion of the dynamics of pricing, and it is something which, especially for us in Ministry of Civil Aviation, will remain a prime focus to see that rates are reasonable, that predatory pricing does not take place, unreasonable price rise does not happen in the airfare. So it's something very important for us.
All right. On that note, Mr. Wallam, appreciate you joining us in this special program and sharing your perspective, talking about transforming aviation sector in India and the Asia Pacific. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And with that, we conclude this special presentation. We were talking about transforming aviation sector in the context of the upcoming Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference on Civil Aviation that India is hosting on the 11th and 12th September. With that, we conclude this special presentation. Namaskar.